Good evening, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming today. My name is Amarachi Nwosu, and today we're doing a Today at Apple on themes of color and culture. So before I introduce a little bit about myself, I'm going to encourage everybody to scan this code if you don't already have the Visco app. This is what we're going to be using today for the hands-on portion of this workshop. So feel free to go ahead and scan this. Also, you could just search VSCO on your app store. Everybody good? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, again, my name is Amarachi Nwosu. I am a visual artist, creative director, and project manager. I consider myself a 360 creative. And when I say that, I ultimately mean that I don't just think about an image, I think about the image, the message behind the image, how that message is translated, where it's translated to, and the community in which it impacts. So I'm always just thinking about the impact my work can make, ultimately. And so, as a visual artist, I work across different mediums of visual work, whether it be photo, video, but today we're going to be specifically talking about photography. I consider myself a digital nomad in many ways, and it's due to me having a global perspective. From very early on, I realized that exposure was an asset. And so being able to travel and growing up in a Nigerian American household taught me that there's multiple lenses in which people are seeing the world. So there's not a one way that people see the world. People are existing in different truths. And due to that, it's how I approach my photography. I look at photography as a way to translate different messages. And one thing I learned from that global perspective was realizing that a lot of people don't always have access to different cultures. And so ultimately, I use photography as a vessel to share the experiences that I've had of all the different places that I've went. And I look at that as an opportunity to really just create impact in the work that I'm doing. I have been privileged to be able to see my work on different platforms as big as Vogue, and really it's just taught me that anything is really possible. When coming up as a visual artist, I really didn't see many people who looked like me. And so it was a priority for me to create the necessary representation that I wanted to see. I realized that I couldn't wait for anybody to create the imagery or tell the stories that I wanted to. I saw myself as a solution maker. You know, for the most part, growing up, looking at mainstream media, I didn't see enough diverse representations, especially of people of color, especially around African identities, cultures, within the diaspora, etc. And so really, that was something that showed me that you can't wait for anybody to manifest the vision that is your calling to actually manifest. You know, this is an opportunity for me to create the change that I want to see and use visual arts as a vessel to tell diverse stories and narratives of cultures around the world. And so I saw my privilege to be able to travel and see the world from these different lenses and viewpoints as a responsibility to also show people, expose people to all the different things that are happening across the world that I'm being exposed to specifically. And you know, I also really saw it as an opportunity for me to inspire young people that anything is possible. Your work can get you to platforms as big as Vogue. It can get you, as long as you have a passion and determination to manifest and create the solutions that you believe are necessary to solve problems, anything is possible. So part of that led me to realize that, okay, I have these ideas. There are things that I want to document, places that I want to show people, experiences that I've seen. But oftentimes, I didn't have platforms that really represented the work that I wanted to push. And so that led to my call to action. I not only wanted to see my work in different places, I felt the responsibility to create platforms where other people of different backgrounds could expose their own identity experiences, etc. And so I developed my platform, Melanin Unscripted. So the idea is that, you know, society is always trying to give us a script for our color and our background, but Melanin Unscripted is about being true to yourself and creating your own script. And so I wanted to show the unscripted and real life reality of people around the world. And so for example, these are some photos that I took in Cape Coast in Ghana, and I'm gonna go through these images a little bit more in detail, but these are examples of the ways that I wanted to visualize different communities that tend to be underrepresented communities. And so when thinking about my vision, it was all about, is your vision authentic, honest, impactful, unscripted storytelling? And so this is really how I view my work. I want it to always represent authenticity, honesty, and really make impact across different cultures and backgrounds. And so that was a little bit of why I started Melanin Unscripted. So I'm sure you guys are wondering, okay, what does this have to do with color and culture? Well, color and culture plays a role in our everyday life. It's how we see ourselves, it's how we see the world around us, it's how we interpret our communities. It's pretty much what makes us who we are. And so that's part of where that name came from, the idea that color and melanin specifically is what gives human skin, eyes, and hair our actual color. So it's ultimately what shapes our identity. And I actually was introduced to this Melanin Map. And so what really struck me about this Melanin Map was the fact that I looked at Australia, for example, and I was like, wow, this is like really dark. But the concept we think of Australia is based on a lot of Western ideology, which is what has happened to Australia post-colonialism. And so then I realized, wait, so if originally this was the melanin map of Australia, most people aren't exposed to this reality. Most people don't know the experiences, for example, Indigenous or Aboriginal people in Australia are experiencing. And so I felt like, wow, like this is really my opportunity to not wait for anybody to create the stories that I want to see. This is my responsibility, this is my call to action. Wherever I go, whatever identities I'm exposed to, I need to show that in some capacity, because otherwise I'm gonna be waiting forever for mainstream media to expose these different things. And so that's partially another reason why I decided to call my platform Melanin Unscripted, which is a creative platform and digital agency. So before I get into my own theory around color and culture, I wanted to get an idea from you guys what color and culture means to you. So can anybody answer that? What does color and culture mean to you? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. It's whatever your interpretation is. Uniqueness, amazing. Anything else? Vibrance, uniqueness, vibrance. Anybody else?
Hey, Mom.
Hi.
I was going to say you can find color within culture.
Exactly. So that's one thing that I thought was really unique, the fact that color and culture is present in our everyday reality. So naturally, it's gonna be present in the visuals that we translate. So I look at photography from a viewpoint of thinking about and contextualizing both color and culture. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about my visual journey and talk a little bit about how color and culture plays a role in these different things. So as a visual artist, I started with photojournalism. I love photojournalism because it's an opportunity for me to tell real stories in real time. With fashion photography, that allows me to tell a story that's coming from my own mind. With music, I get to work with different artists and translate their own stories. And with branded content specifically, I get to tell stories around brands. So this image here is an image I took of an Afrobeat artist called Mr. Easy. So if you heard some of the music earlier that was playing, that's Afrobeats music that has derived from West Africa. Pretty early on, I realized that there was a lack of narratives, especially around African artists. And so when I met Mr. Easy, what was so unique is that to me, he had such a unique story, and I felt like more people really needed to know more about him. But one thing that I felt within a gap was that a lot of people don't know him because there's not a lot of visual content around him. There's not enough content to translate who he is, his brand, etc. And so because of that, there can be a limitation in the global audience he can reach. And so I put a team together under a platform that I entered at called High Snobiety, and this team pretty much composed of mainly African creatives. And so I thought that why not just show an image of who he is, but have a team around him that represents the culture and would be able to translate that culture in an authentic way. And so as you see in this image, like, he's in New York City, but there's still a level of authentic Africanness to it, especially because we had the face paint by an artist named Laulu, who also did Beyonce's face paint during her run around Lemonade, her project. And so really, I saw this as an opportunity to translate something new around this artist, but present him in a way in which a global audience could engage. What I didn't imagine as an intern was my photo that I took for a magazine, then becoming an Apple Music billboard. And so what's so unique about this is the fact that this was my first billboard, and now I'm here speaking to you guys at Apple, and it's just a full circle moment, especially being from DC and like being in my hometown and just being able to engage with you guys. And so I realized early, okay, he liked these images so much that he wanted it to represent his brand. And one thing I realized is that there's a lot of artists that don't always have visual content which can translate their brand. And so I saw it as an opportunity to translate more than just a music artist's brand, but be able to translate different kinds of storytelling. So now to go a little bit into photojournalism. So to me, photojournalism is my favorite style of photography. The reason being is because I get to be a fly on the wall and I get to just document what's actually happening. I don't have to curate anything ahead. So a few years ago, I had the opportunity to document Nigeria's first skate crew, Waffles and Cream. I had no clue that there were skaters in Nigeria. And so as soon as I heard, I was like, whoa, like, where are these kids? Like, I want to learn more about them. But I slowly realized that there was images missing on who they were or what they did. And so I reached out to Jomi, who's the founder of Waffles and Cream. At first, he was pretty hesitant because he had felt like the photojournalists that had previously come didn't really represent them in a unique light. And so I assured him, like, I'm a fly on the wall. I'm here to document your reality. I'm not here to create anything for you. I'm just watching, observing, and documenting. And immediately he thought that was like really unique because it's like, it's not somebody as a photojournalist coming to try and impose a story on their subjects. It's somebody that just wants to show their reality. And so I got to document them pretty much just skating at a regular day in Lagos, Nigeria. And what I love about it is that it really just shows so many different elements, the people around. One thing, this is one of my favorite images because the lady here who's walking in her native garment, you see her and you see that curiosity that she has around what he's doing. So this is something that is very new to the space. There hasn't been skaters previously who are just going around. And so pretty much I thought of it as an opportunity to actually show the youth culture movements that are happening across Nigeria and West Africa and globally as a whole. And so these images ended up going on the magazine that I had worked for, but what I didn't imagine, again, is the fact that these images then were on CNN, these images were on BuzzFeed. And so I slowly realized again, okay, images actually do have an opportunity to make a strong impact and also translate what is happening across different cultures. And so in my approach with photography, like I said, I'm always thinking about the context of color and culture. And so, for example, I would say within culture, this representation of the lady watching, that's a part of culture. The representation of the environment, way they are, that's a part of culture. But when it comes to color, I think about the fact that this is in a warmer climate. And so naturally, when I'm editing, I'm thinking about the tones in which I'm editing with. I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about how the colors pop. And for the most part, that's kind of how I'm able to translate images, just thinking in that context. Next is fashion photography. So one thing that I love about fashion photography is just my ability to kind of tell a story that I want to show. Nobody's coming to me and saying, hey, you have to do this or that. It's, hey, I want to create something. And basically with these images, this came from an editorial called Formless. So the idea was to show images of both of male and female protagonists in unity, and them not necessarily be defined by concepts of masculinity or concepts of femininity, but were really just authentically kind of existing as themselves and realizing that these two figures can exist seamlessly. And so it wasn't really a romance story. It was really just about how can we create something that feels, that is projecting a story around unity. So we thought about things from everything from them putting their hands up and kind of being a mirror of each other. And with color, really for me, it was like, whenever I'm working with a fashion team, I always let them know like, hey, I would love to see color in this. Obviously, I love color. That's why this whole Apple Talk is centered around color and culture. And so I'll be like, okay, I want to see a pop in the clothing. If there's no pop in the clothing, I want to see a pop in the environment. Specifically with these images, there was no pop in the environment. So it was about seeing the colors pop and really allowing the model to be amplified through that. And so this is definitely one of my favorite series because of that, because I feel like this is really a mirror of unity, but it's a mirror of being formless and not being defined by either masculinity or femininity and just existing as oneself. Another opportunity I've been able to have is to work around music. So I was blessed with the opportunity to go on tour with Childish Gambino for his This Is America tour in 2018. At first, when I was asked, I was a little bit hesitant because I was like, wait, I'm not a concert photographer. Like, how am I going to approach this? And I also felt like sometimes there could be limitations in how much storytelling that I can put in within concert photography. But I decided to take a risk and really just try something new. One thing that I really love about working on this tour was just being able to see the essence of the artist. Childish Gambino to me is one of the most humble artists that I've been able to work with. Whether you're walking on stage, he's saying hi to the sound guy, he's saying hi to the photographers. He's not afraid to kind of express his personality and share that with other people. And so really when taking these photos, I wanted to think about the culture of the artist himself and pretty much just show the essence of unity and team, hence why I took this photo of their team huddle ahead of the show. And I chose to use black and white specifically for these images because I felt like it allowed you to see the image more clearly and kind of focus on what was happening in terms of the unity of them coming together. I also wanted to kind of just show him in his regular essence, him walking before the show. He's in his robe, he's getting ready. But at the same time, I wanted to show that there's a team effort. It's a collective effort when working around music. It's not a one-man show. And really, one thing that I love about him as well is the passion that he has for his performance, for every aspect of performance, from the stage, the sound design, to the actual passion he exerts when performing. And so these are things that I also wanted to show. And pretty much I was able to do that and much translate the culture around his tour, as well as kind of bring out some of those tones. So when I'm editing images like this, I already know, for example, that there's a lot of blue lights, there's a lot of blue in this image, so I'm working to kind of enhance that and make it a little bit extra because I want you to really feel it. So that is kind of the context of color and culture when it comes to concert photography. Another opportunity I've had is to work around branded content. So a lot of people ask me questions like, what is branded content? Branded content is ultimately using visuals as a means to sell a product. Specifically, this was Beats. Beats Japan had partnered with a fashion magazine. And so the challenge for me here was not to only show the product in a tasteful way, it was to also represent the artist. So this artist here is JP the Wavy. He's a rapper in Tokyo. So I actually lived in Tokyo for 2 years, and that's why I was able to get opportunities like this. Komai, for example, is an alternative artist in Japan. So now I had the challenge of expressing the artist's brand. I had the challenge of showing the clothing, but also showing the product in an authentic way. So I would say good branded content is not overselling the actual product. It's supposed to feel seamless and natural to them. Like, we're always using our headphones. So it's like, it's something that is kind of with us a lot. But what was unique about this specifically with Beats was the fact that it was a Bluetooth headphone. And so I wanted to just be able to express their essence. But one thing in which I tried to implement ideas around color and culture was, once again, telling the stylist, hey, I want to see a pop in their clothing. Because to me, color is what grips people when they see an image. It's what catches their attention. And so in these images, there's so many different things going on, but the color almost allows you to take a moment and sit with it. And so I wanted to show the environment, the culture of them being Japanese artists. You know, you see the Japanese characters and symbols in the background, and you see kind of a little bit of the environment, but this essence is still on the artists themselves, as well as the product that is being showed. So now I'm gonna get into a little bit about different regions and how I think about color and culture in these different spaces, for example. Specifically starting with North America. So I had the opportunity to shoot a fashion editorial called Africa Now. Now the challenge I had with this is that we're not shooting in Africa. So it's a way where I still had to think about, okay, how do I make this still authentic to the cultures that we're trying to represent? Because it was unique that they were models were wearing only African clothing. And so I had to think about this in both post-production, but also like where we're shooting. So we shot in LA, and starting with this image on the right, what I can tell you is that the background was not green. These are things that I changed in post-production. And I'm sure you guys kind of noticed that red undertone on him. That's using gel lights. And so with this image, I really wanted his skin to pop, and I wanted to be a strong contrast between the model and the background itself. And so that's why I used color as an opportunity to do that through the image on the left. Now here on the right image, it was about, again, representing African fashion, but also African culture. You know, growing up, like, I rarely saw images of Black people, to me, looking very royal and looking very empowered. And so for me, my priority is always to make sure that when representing Black people, especially shooting them, they look powerful, you know? And I love the fact that he looks confident. To me, he looks royal. And so that was kind of the inspiration behind making sure that he was represented in a unique way, despite being in an environment that was not Africa itself, but still adding a touch of that, thinking about locations, thinking about colors, styling, etc. So next, I shot a streetwear editorial with a model by the name of Sarah Conte. One thing I've noticed, especially in streetwear, is the lack of representation when it comes to Black women. And so it was really important for me to create that representation. Again, I see myself as a solution maker. I'm not gonna wait for anybody to create the vision that I know that I'm supposed to. And so it was about showing her in kind of a street chic essence, but also representing Black women in a space in streetwear that they're often not represented. And so that was kind of the inspiration behind that. And just talking about that too is that, you know, obviously we're here today around Black History Month. To me, the people that have really made change are people that have taken risks. Despite seeing problems, they see solutions through themselves. And so again, regardless of not seeing the representations, I can create that. And so for me, this was about me loving streetwear and wanting to be able to inspire another young woman who may love streetwear to also see herself represented in those spaces. Next, I shot something with an artist called Toby Liu. So Toby Liu is like one of my favorite artists. He's like a hip hop trap artist. And one thing that's super unique about Toby is the fact that he's super playful and he has this very much so this childlike curiosity that exists within him. And so for me, I was like, yo, Toby, like, let's go shoot. I don't see enough images of you. And he was like, okay, sure. And so one thing is that because he has such a ambient personality, and to me, again, that very childlike curiosity, I kind of wanted to represent that in a way that showed the culture around him as an artist, but obviously you see all these colors and these tones popping out. For example, in the background, there's like the candy machine, and it's like, he looks like a big kid because he's a big kid. And also here on the right, he's like on a pony with the ball. The ball matches his shorts, and that was also very intentional. It's just thinking of like, how can this image keep your attention a little bit, but also how can this image represent the artist who is authentically himself? And so that was kind of the inspiration behind these images. And I would say, like, in terms of thinking about the technique of edit, I was pulling a lot of saturation from the tones and really just making sure there was a warmth around him. Despite being in a space like LA, just still making sure that pop of warmth was present. Now for Africa. So obviously, like, thinking about color and culture, when you're in Africa, it's a warmer climate. So naturally, when I'm editing photos there, I'm thinking about the fact that I need to add a little bit more warm saturation and texture to this. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Nigeria, and I was shooting for a fashion week called Arise. And during this time, I got to shoot Naomi Campbell, who's here with these kids. So these kids are called Dream Catchers. They are a dance collective in Lagos. And pretty much one thing that I really wanted to do was, like, I didn't want to show Naomi in the light that we always see her. We see her on Vogue, we see her on runway, she looks glamorous and amazing, but I really wanted to use this as an opportunity to humanize her through these images and show her in a different light. It wasn't about, oh, a hero complex. I didn't want to show these kids sad because they're in not ideal circumstance. I wanted to show the abundance that was within them, the happiness that they exerted despite the circumstances that they lived in. And she was sharing different products with them. And pretty much, I didn't also want to show her as a hero. I wanted to show that both the dancers and the kids and Naomi were sharing and exchanging abundance. It wasn't a hero and there wasn't a victim. These were people that were sharing abundance with each other. And so one thing that was important to me, this was basically when they were welcoming her, was just capturing the essence of who they are. And so with photojournalism, that's kind of like the challenge that you have, capturing the essence, but at the same time allowing things to just exist as they are. And so I love the fact that they had yellow pop. And so when I'm editing these images, I'm adding that additional pop. I'm bringing the yellow tones out because I want there to be a level of warmth that exists in the image. And really, this is one of my favorite images because, again, this was an opportunity to humanize Naomi. Like, yes, she is a fashion mogul, but at the same time, she's a human that understands of sharing abundance with each other. Now, I've been able to shoot a bunch of different fashion stories over the last few years, but this one in particular was one of my favorites. So I named this story Sankofa. I shot this in Cape Coast, Ghana, at the Cape Coast Slave Castle. So one thing I've noticed is obviously like around this Cape Coast Slave Castle, there's always been narratives of disempowerment, you know, because of the history of slavery and colonization. But I said, you know what? I want to exist in a world where my kid can look at or think about Cape Coast and not just think about slavery and disempowerment. I want it to be an opportunity to actually empower Black bodies in a space where often they were disempowered over the course of history. And so one thing that was really a priority for me was to have a strong female protagonist. I wanted the woman character to be the most vivid character within the image because I felt like women were the ones the most berated in that time. So this was an opportunity, again, to flip the script and show the unscripted perspective of what the castle means. And so here, again, when I'm doing fashion photography, the colors are intentional, the movement is intentional. I wanted to show that there's a level of unity. I wanted to show that they're coming together. And really, because the environment didn't have a pop of color, this was my opportunity to kind of bring warmth within the image. So again, it's about really recognizing that you have to create that representation that you want to see. Nobody's going to create it for you. And again, we're here today because of Black History Month. So the idea is that whether we think of MLK or we think of Rosa Parks, these are people that took risks. These are people that saw problems and wanted to be the solution. As a visual artist, I see editorials like this as an opportunity to create solutions around narratives and really just allow for there to be new narratives created, because every day we're making history. Every day that we're existing, the things we're doing, 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, we're gonna look at it as history. And so I wanted there to be a mark in history of showing this Cape Coast Castle as more than just an image or a representation of our disempowered. I wanted, again, to be empowered through this. So the next set of images I shot in Ghana as well. So I had an opportunity to shoot artists for a magazine called The Fader. This was basically a shoot around me documenting creatives in Ghana. And so one thing that was really unique about this was that I felt like every artist had their own unique essence. On the left, you see Darko Vibes. He has a song called Mike Tyson, and he was actually playing it, and he was just like throwing punches like Mike Tyson. I was like, yo, he's so abundant, and he always has so much energy, and I wanted to express that and show him in his authentic manner. But at the same time, again, I wanted to think about the pop of color. So the culture of himself, the movement, everything, but then the pop of color in the background, bringing out those green tones, bringing out the orange tones. With Kukwa, again, it was really important for me to represent her. And one thing that I did in these images was kind of take the highlights out of her face, because I wanted her to pop within that yellow background. I wanted her to be the center of that image ultimately. And so it allowed me to pretty much just make her the center, but at the same time bring out those colors and show the environment in a unique way. So again, like looking at the responsibility of showing that there's youth culture movements going on globally, and having the opportunity to document them and give access to people who may not see this, you know, because for the most part, if someone is growing up in Detroit, for example, and they've never been or have friends who are from Ghana, they'll never know that there's a whole youth culture movement taking place. So as a visual artist, my responsibility is also to be a history keeper, because I'm somebody that's thinking about 20, 30 years down the line, how are people going to remember the people that were pushing boundaries? especially around Africa. It's super important because if you think about 1920s, 1930s, there's a limited representation that you may have in your mind of what Africa is, and that's partially because there weren't many photographers, there weren't many visual artists to document their own realities, their own experiences, and share those narratives. So being in this unique position has allowed me to be that history keeper. And one thing here is that when shooting this, I also wrote the story. So one thing I kind of learned very early on was that when you have your images placed in media, there's more impact that can be made. But a lot of the times I was kind of like waiting for people, like writers, to write about my work. And so I said, you know what, I'm not gonna wait for that. I'm gonna write about my work. I'm gonna document my work, and I'm gonna make sure that these people are represented well. Because if I'm taking the photograph and I'm getting to see the experiences, being able to translate their story makes that impact even stronger. So then again, that's me thinking as a 360 creative. So as I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to live in Tokyo for almost 2 years. And during that period, I've been able to like document a bunch of different people. Specifically here, I was able to document Malala. Malala is the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner, and her platform, Malala Fund, actually hit up my agency and asked me to document her first trip to Japan to meet the Prime Minister of Japan. And one thing that was very unique was that again, this is a little bit of photojournalism. I wanted to document her essence, but at the same time document the culture of the space that she's in. Specifically in this photo, like she has like her red color pop. And one thing that's unique is in the back is a red taxi. You only see these taxis specifically in Japan. And so this was kind of an opportunity to kind of show her in her natural essence, existing as herself, but also add that element of culture that she is in Tokyo, she is in Japan. So I saw the car coming, I was like, yo, Malala, wait, and then took the photo because I wanted to mark that specific moment. Here, she actually did a workshop with the first female sushi chef in Japan. If you don't know, Malala won Nobel Peace Prize for the work that she's done around women and girls empowerment as well as education. And so for me, this was an opportunity to visually translate her trip in a way that actually told her story. So her being with the first Japanese sushi chef and first female-led run Japanese sushi restaurant, I wanted to kind of show the care that she took to understand the culture as well. And so as you see here, she's making sushi with the chef, but like you can see the attention to detail she has, just looking and making sure to pay attention. So documenting those moments are super important. Now this picture, these set of pictures I took of one of my favorite artists called Smino. So Smino is an R&B and hip hop artist. And taking pictures of him in Tokyo was pretty cool because it's just, again, documenting his essence. But one thing I love about this image, particularly on the right, is that him and this Japanese businessman are walking kind of at the same time in a similar pace, but there's such a distinct difference in the culture that they're coming from. So obviously this Japanese businessman is like focused getting to work, but kind of like Smino's like in his lounge streetwear, and he's just a little bit like he obviously has color pop, and you just see the distinct difference. And so to me, this was kind of translating the difference in culture and being able to visually contextualize that. So yeah, it was really awesome shooting Smino, and he's super vibrant. And now in Tokyo as well, I was able to shoot another story for the Fader, but now talking about youth culture movements specifically in Japan. And so this is El Teresa. El Teresa is a hip hop trap artist in Japan. First of all, I didn't even know that there were female trap artists in Japan. But you know, once I found out about her, immediately I was like, I need to document her. She's super animated, but one thing about her too, she's so fearless, she's confident, she doesn't care who's watching, and she's able to really exert that. And so through this image, I really wanted to translate that confidence, that ability to walk in her truth, regardless of her environment. So more so documenting kind of like that essence, that culture around hip hop. To me, that's what hip hop represents, just like existing through you as yourself and not being afraid and kind of like pushing your own boundaries. And so on the left side was Yuki Beb, who's a DJ, and pretty much this was more so of the context of color. I wanted the crates to pop, and you see these crates all over Tokyo. And so for me, it was an opportunity to kind of show that essence of Japan. So now it's you guys' turn to edit some photos and kind of take some of these theories that I mentioned around color and culture. And so one thing to mention as well, going back, is that I'm sure you guys notice how there's a little bit of difference in how I'm editing both skin tones and environments. So here, it's not as warm as my previous images. That's partially due to the fact that I'm editing a different kind of skin tone in a different environment. So kind of taking that theory that I've introduced to you guys today, you guys have the opportunity to use the VSCO app. Again, if you didn't already download it, please feel free to do so. And I'm allowing you guys to use 2 of my images to kind of edit and contextualize that theory yourself. So feel free to scan this and you guys will have access to these images. And I'm gonna introduce my lovely creative pro, Hannah, who's gonna kind of go through the VSCO app with you a little bit, and then kind of touch on tools and presets. So quickly, to just give my take on tools and presets, one thing that's really cool about VSCO is that they pretty much give you presets that already have an edit, and you have the opportunity to kind of choose how much you want that edit to be seen. And then you have the opportunity to use the tools to specifically work around things like exposure, contrast, and saturation, which is going to bring out the color tones a little bit more. And so Hannah's going to walk through with you the app itself and some of the tools that you can use within it.
Awesome. Thank you, Amarachi. Let's give a quick round of applause.
Thank you. Neon lights, you naturally see colors balance, bump, or like bounce off of actual things. So this here, I like that because then it kind of, you know, like I was talking about more warmth and like that temperature. So this would make more sense in Tokyo, taking that out. It allows you to see that kind of young king, older king a little bit more, because the yellow from his shirt kind of took all the attention. But now I feel like the story is you and him versus the noise that was kind of around through color. So I guess this would be where culture is more important than color. So I hope you guys enjoyed that hands-on portion of the workshop. So now we're gonna go through some of the images that you guys have edited. So I selected a few different images and I'm just gonna go through kind of the differences that I see. And if you see your image, feel free to raise your hand so I know it's yours and to give you a little shout out. Does anybody know this is their image? You think it's yours? Okay. So I thought this image was obviously very distinctly different from the original one, and I thought it was cool because she added some like red undertones and overtones and really kind of brought out the saturation in the image a lot. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Did you want to say anything about why you edited it that way?
Well, aside from not really knowing what I was doing, what I was trying to do is kind of bring out the theme of the earth. Because when I think about Africa, I think about the earth and the importance of that. And so I thought by trying to create this reddish hue, I could kind of illustrate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
That's amazing. Give a shout out to her. It's a dope image. Next photo. So I thought this one was really interesting as well because I noticed that they brought down some of the saturation that was in the image and kind of made the back of the image a little bit cooler. So does anybody know if this is their photo? This is your photo. Awesome. So can you tell me a little bit of why you chose to edit it like this?
Well, I noticed that you had made her skin tone spot on yours, so I figured I would just pull it down on the background.
Yeah,
Find
well,
balance.
yeah, I like the balance. I like the balance you created. So yeah, give a shout out to him, you guys. Next up, okay, so I thought this was a really cool image because they brought out a lot of grain, so it almost looks like the image was taken in film instead of digital. Does anybody know if this is their image? Hey. So tell us a little bit of why you edited like this.
I just wanted to basically like dilute it a little bit, take out all of the color that was in the natural film, but add grain to it to make it like a lot older, a little bit dated. So that was my thought process.
Amazing. Give a shout out to him. I love that. It definitely looks like this could have been taken in 1980, a different era. So I thought that's cool. Next. Okay, so this one has a lot more saturation, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red. Whose photo is this? Mom, is this your photo? It is. Shout out to my mother. So Mom, why'd you edit it like this?
I guess I just wanted a little light to grab the image and just add some vibrancy to the edit.
Okay. Well, clearly I got some photography genes from her. All right. Next up. Okay, so one thing I immediately see is that there's a little bit more saturation, but they added more blue to this. Whose image is this? Tell us a little bit of why you edited like this.
I was really focusing on the background, so like I really wanted to stand out of everything. I saw the KFC sign. So I kind of felt like that was the only bright red. Everything else had like a blue off. So I felt like if I made that stand out, it was still kind of making it stand out.
Amazing. Give a shout out to him. This is dope. Next up. Ooh, I see the red, I see the vibrance, I see the saturation. The color pops. Whose photo is this? Yours. So tell me a little bit of why you edited it like this.
So, I mean, she just gave me such like a rocker chick vibe. And it just reminded me of Kill Bill. So I just felt like she wanted to like seriously pop, especially with like the boots.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I love this edit. So give a shout out to her, you guys. Next. Okay, so this is the exact opposite of what we just saw. They took all that color out and they were like, she's gonna stand out. So who took this? Who did this edit? Ayo. So why'd you edit it like this?
I'm rebellious. No, honestly, just the way I like to edit things. I like exposure a little higher than usual and try to make the subject fade into the background but still visible to the eye. So, yeah.
Amazing. Give a shout out to him. I love this. Next. Okay, so this has really brought out more contrast in the image. I see a texture that has almost made it a little bit more vintage. So who edited this image? Oops. So why'd you edit it like this?
I just wanted it to look like an image that like is like worn out, like you've had it for a while. So you know, it was once fresh, but now it's like this.
Dope, give a shout out to him. I like this. So obviously you see there's so many variations that you guys can do with a photo using color tones and theory. For example, he wanted it to look a little bit more vintage, like an older image that had been used, or and really it brought out a whole different energy in the photo. So amazing. And our last image. So this image wasn't of one of the ones we shared, but I was actually with him when he was editing it. So can you give the mic to Femi and allow him to tell you a little bit of why he chose this edit?
I chose this edit with the help of my team. Team, raise your hand, please. Cool. Just to be able to show, you know, the crowning of one king to another. Originally, the young man, he has a green shirt, and I really tried to highlight that, but with the help of my team, we tried to put more focus on the actual image of the crown and put a little bit more emphasis on the shirt. I feel like it was perfect for the scene, you know, and just to be able to emphasize right here in the middle.
Amazing. And so yeah, I was with him when he was editing this. Originally, this was in color. And one thing I noticed, you guys obviously can't see this now, he was wearing a neon green shirt. And he told me about the theme that he was going with the image. And I said, wow, like, I feel like if you use black and white, that theme of passing the crown from one king to another would come out more, because you would focus on the two characters versus the noise or the colors around him. So amazing. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. So I'm gonna go through some of my end sentiments. So obviously I wanna just say thank you guys so much for like rocking with me with this session and just being able to take all these different notes and things that I've learned. Ultimately, I wanted to leave you guys with a few things. So starting with, stay true to your vision. It's your vision, and because it's your vision, nobody else is gonna be able to manifest it but you. If you see something or you wanna see something, you're gonna be the person that has to create that. You're gonna have to make that history yourself, because you can't wait for anybody else to create that vision for you. Whether you believe in God, you believe in the universe, you believe in a spiritual being, there's somebody that's planted seeds in you to allow you to see a vision, and you have to be the one to manifest it again. Create a story worth telling. I really think creating your own story is so important, and I think when thinking about creating a story worth telling, there's so many stories out there that have never been told. I'm sure you've met friends, you've met people throughout the course of your life, and you're like, wow, you have an amazing story. More people should know this. Well, that might mean you're the one that's gonna have to translate that story. And so really, you know, sometimes like I feel like, oh, like let me shoot this really big artist and this is gonna create impact. No, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the stories of everyday people that are gonna translate the most and create that impact. So that goes into my next point. Focus on impact over noise. So again, I just had an example of, should I shoot this celebrity? Is this gonna create impact? Not necessarily. As I told you, some of my favorite images, like the photojournalism I showed you earlier with Nigeria's first skate crew, I saw the impact that was able to create, because literally today in December, those same skaters were on the cover of ID magazine, which is arguably one of the most influential fashion magazines in the world. And the fact that I was able to come in their space, document them, and tell their story, which then translated, and to see years later the impact that made, that they're on the cover of a major magazine, you know, till this day, the founder tells me, yo, like, you're the one that helped us blow. You're the one that allowed us to be exposed to a whole new audience. And so I saw the impact that I was able to make on the skate scene in Nigeria. So sometimes impact isn't gonna come in the most shiny thing. Sometimes impact is in the everyday story that people need to hear. And last but definitely not least, don't be afraid to stand out. As you can see, I lived in Tokyo for 2 years. Most of that time, I did not meet many other black women. In this picture, I had no clue this was being taken, by the way. My friend was across the street and saw the image and immediately took the photo. And so it's just me walking in Harajuku. I don't even notice that I'm different. But looking back at this image, there's nobody else around that looks like me, but I took that risk. I went to Tokyo, I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have any friends there, but I took the risk because sometimes one, you have to risk it for the biscuit, but two, nothing grows in a comfort zone. So I knew that taking that risk was gonna allow me to create in a way that I never thought before. And I was able to, as you've seen from the images that I shot in Tokyo, be able to create my own small impact in that space. And so, no, there weren't many black women, but I got to be that representation that I wanted to see. And so ultimately, that was me standing out, but it was also me standing in my purpose. And so I'm gonna leave you with a quote by me. Your art should reflect your truth. Do not ignore your truth trying to uphold someone else's standards or expectations. It's your truth, it's your story to tell. Everybody in this room has greatness within them, greatness that sometimes needs to be unlocked, sometimes needs to be remembered, but ultimately there's something within you and a story to tell within you, and it's your responsibility to tell it. Again, nobody's gonna tell your story. You have to be the one to do that. And I feel like, especially now, this is an amazing time, especially as a black visual artist, as an artist of color, a lot of these narratives have never been told, and we have the responsibility to tell them. Because 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, when people are referencing, okay, what happened? They're gonna reference the things that you guys created. They're gonna reference the truth that you allowed yourself to expose and share with the world. And so ultimately, I just wanted to leave with the note of like, everybody in this room has their own superpower, has their own abundance to create and share, whether you're a visual artist or you're somebody that is an entrepreneur, a doctor. Everybody has a responsibility to share their greatness with others. And for me, it was sharing through visual work and making sure to leave a testament and leave impact through my images. And I hope you guys learned something today. So thank you guys so much for rocking with me. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming out today. We had a blast. Can we get our hands of applause? That's right, folks.
And so I just want to make sure that before we fully end everything, did anybody have any questions? Any questions?
What is the hardest thing about being a visual artist and storyteller?
I would say that the hardest thing is the fact that as a creative, the system of art hasn't changed over the last 100 years. A lot of the times you're still waiting for a patron to pretty much commission you to create work, or you're creating work with your own resources. And so kind of finding that balance of like doing branded content, but at the same time making sure to do those photo stories that actually mean something to me, that I feel can create impact is important. So I would say balancing being a visual artist, but also thinking as a businesswoman and making sure that I can live off of my art. It's gel lights that I use. So there's like a gel filter that you can put in front of lights, and it's going to project whatever that color is. So, but I'm pretty sure there's gels you can put directly on your lens, but I use the filter to put on the light. In the bag.
How do you know, like, when you feel your photo's good enough? Like, when do you know that feeling?
How do I know when I feel? You know what's funny, sometimes I look at a photo, like when I'm taking it, I'm like, oh, it's all right. But then I look back, I'm like, dang, I was going off during that shoot. So it's like, sometimes like you may look at an image and initially you don't see the spark in that, but maybe that spark comes later. So I wouldn't say like I would say that varies, but usually I know that my photo is shown from internally, or sometimes it's like a friend tells me like, yo, that's a dope image. And I'm like, you're right, that is a dope image. So I would say that. And I think I'm gonna take 2 more questions. So back here.
Peace, peace. Thank you so much, Ms. Amarachi, for coming.
Thank you.
Super happy to have you here. My question for you, and I know I missed most of your presentation, however, I'm interested to hear more about how your work with color and culture coincide with music. Here we are in a music-based city and in a music venue. Yeah, how do you feel your work kind of presents this tone or rhythm?
So I would say like my work represents color and culture in general, but when working with a music artist, I want to project whatever the culture of that individual is, whether it's their actual ethnic background or the culture around their energy or what they represent. So I would say like, really, I'm always thinking about the brand of an artist and how I can amplify their brand using visual collateral. So something that I had showed earlier with Mr. Easy. Could we go to that picture of Mr. Easy? So something I had showed earlier with Mr. Easy was the fact that, and I'm about to show you guys, going through all these images. Okay, so earlier I had showed you an Apple Music billboard that I did for Mr. Easy. And so for me, my take on this was making sure that, obviously I love color, so I told the stylist, please have him wear a pop of color. But then I would say culture was specifically making sure that African culture was represented within the image. So that was working with Laulu, because if it was without the face paint, you wouldn't really know the difference between, oh, is he an African artist or an American artist? So creating and distinguishing that through elements of the photos, kind of how I brought that home. And I know you had a question in the back. And you did too, and that'll be the last one.
Hi.
How are you?
So you initially mentioned about being a digital nomad, right? And for me as a creative, moving countries was really difficult for me to kind of draw inspiration. So how do you draw inspiration when you like cross countries? That was interesting.
I would say, like, for example, living in Tokyo, I was just super inspired by the environment in general. Again, there's a bunch of colors and tones, and I feel like my love for color within my photography actually amplified in Japan because I was able to use the environment more to bring that out. For example, the opposite of that would be like in Nigeria. I think the people is what inspired me. The people that are there, their stories, the things I learned, the energy of how they're engaging and interacting. So maybe in Tokyo, I focus on the actual image, the individual within the context of the environment, but maybe when I'm in Nigeria, I'm focusing on the mannerisms of the individual or the environment and how they're engaging within that environment more so. But ultimately, I'm inspired by different environments. I'm inspired by DC. I'm inspired by being in this room with all the things you guys have shared and all the ways that I've learned how you guys are editing photos and approaching that. So I wouldn't say there's one way, but just being in new environments and being out of my comfort zone is spaces where I always grow and I learn something new. So that's how I would say. And did you have that final question?
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Hope you're well.
I just want to say thank you for coming out. I'm glad I was able to come. I'm really very motivated by what you're saying, because I do photography as well, and it can be a little discouraging sometimes when you put a lot of effort into something and I feel like it doesn't go as you planned it, but I guess it's part of the journey. So thank you for coming out and sharing your
course, thank you.
My question to you is, a lot of the brands and like magazines you listed that you were able to shoot from, excuse me, I read them or I am interested in doing that. What would you say that these companies look for when they choose, you, or for example, you got like thousands of people to represent you?
So I would definitely say, like, going back to some of those points I made in the final slide of like create a story worth telling. A lot of the stories that I'm creating are things that I haven't seen before. For example, with Sankofa doing that fashion story in Cape Coast and kind of flipping the script on the concepts that have been traditionally associated with the space allowed me to get that on Vogue. And I think the headline was like, meet the Nigerian American photographer, like basically using visuals to talk about race. And so a lot of the times people aren't using fashion photography to talk about race and race relations. So I would say how I do that is making sure to always tell a story that hasn't been told before in the way that I want to approach it. If I'm just taking a photo in a white backdrop with Childish Gambino or Rihanna, that's a photo you've seen before. But making sure to document stories that haven't been told allows me to engage with those platforms. Another thing, like I mentioned before, is like not waiting for those platforms to validate me. Validating myself, putting it out there, sharing it with my community. And naturally, when there's a buzz around images, sometimes a publication will pick it up and ask me, but also I'm always pitching. Ayo, who runs One Tribe magazine, probably knows I'm always pitching because I'm always pitching to him. So it's like, ultimately, I'm always sending my work around. I'm not afraid to knock on doors. I'm not afraid to break down doors. I will always make sure if I think something is possible, if I see it in my mind, then it can happen, it can manifest. So maybe when I was younger and I believed like, I don't see images of people on Vogue who look like me, I was discouraged. But once I believed it was possible, I did my research. I was looking up who's this editor? I was looking up emails. I'm always looking up emails. Like, how can I read? They probably get annoyed with me, but it's okay because again, I'm gonna break down that door if nobody's willing to open it for me. So I would say, pitch, but also make sure that you're pitching a story that's going to engage well with that platform, and make sure you cater that pitch to that platform, because if you have a story that's on skate culture, it may not make sense to pitch to a beauty magazine. So just making sure wherever you want to place it, it can be seamless and add value to their platform. Think about it as a value exchange. At the end of the day, and that's another thing with ownership and content, a lot of the times these publications don't have the funds to pay for content. So you have to kind of decide, am I shooting this for money or am I shooting this to make sure that this is gonna be seen? And you approach it differently. So yeah, that's how I would say I kind of approach it. But yeah, all right, that was the final question. So again, thank you guys so much. So I also just want to encourage you guys to come out for the other Black History Month events that are at Apple Carnegie this month. So we just had mine and there's a few more talks. So feel free to come here on the 13th, the 20th, the 8th, the 16th, the 27th. There is a bunch of events going on with a lot of amazing creatives that you guys should check out. It's all about Black History Month. We're celebrating Black history. We're creating Black history. And now it's your opportunity to create your own history. So thank you guys so much again.